Hello everybody, and welcome to the inaugural video of my channel Playingmoderate. And I'm just going to dive right into the content here. With this video, I wanted to dissect for you a particular argument that I've been seeing recently. I want to explain what the argument is, how it's being used, why it is fallacious, and what the appropriate response to it should be. So first of all, the argument in question is the argument that black people cannot be racist. I'm sure you heard or read of this one before. The idea behind this statement, and I hope that I'm not mischaracterizing this, if I am, please let me know. But the idea behind the statement that I've gleaned to be behind the statement is what is necessary to constitute racism by this definition is discrimination and or prejudice based on race that is perpetuated by a system that is to say is systemic, and that it cannot pertain to those who are subjected or oppressed or disenfranchised by the race in power, the race who controls the system. Therefore, in the Western world at least, black people cannot be racist. Now, the definition alone, as a definition, I don't necessarily have a problem with. Language is in fact fluid. It has always been that way. A word's usage within a language is entirely dependent on how the culture is currently using it. Dictionaries don't determine the definition of a word. They archive the definition of a word as it is being used, as it has been used. This is why if you look in a dictionary, you'll see multiple numbers underneath each word, providing the reader with multiple definitions. The first is the primary or current definition. The second is either an out-of-date or secondary definition the word has, and so on and so forth. So if somebody is using a word to mean something different than I use a word to mean, they're not necessarily wrong to do so. They may be using the word different than the majority of people who speak the same language, but language doesn't change without impetus, and new definitions have to begin some way. Putting that aside, the claim itself in the context of this new definition is certainly contentious. In order for the definition of racism to not apply to black people, you would first have to prove systemic discrimination against black people, which is actually not going to be the subject of this video. It's not a claim that I'm going to address. What I wanted to call attention to with this video instead, in the scope of this argument, black people can't be racist, is that it is being used as one of the most egregious red herrings I have ever seen surface, and it is one that apparently is being taken seriously. So the argument. This argument is almost invariably used as a rebuttal. That is, it's used after an accusation of racism. We've seen it used by proponents of the Black Lives Matter movement. This movement is entirely based on issues of race, and many of the more radical and outspoken faces of the movement will advocate for things like segregated housing, like we've seen some universities beginning to offer. We'll see like the videos of the riots in Charlotte where black people were targeting white people with acts of violence, and some of these things elicit the accusation of racism. This is where the rebuttal comes out. No, they'll say it isn't racist because black people can't be racist. Now, this is a very clear example of the logical fallacy known as the red herring. The red herring is an argument or statement that is made which draws the conversation away from the argument at hand. It is essentially a derailment technique, with intelligent debaters it is at least. I'm sure there are plenty of people who don't understand the flaw in their logic because they simply are just parroting what they've heard others say. These people get a pass, essentially. The ones who knowingly use this technique in order to avoid answering an accusation of being racist should be, and rightfully so, excoriated for it. Here's why. Suppose somebody makes an assertion like white people should be required to give all of their extra money to black people, like one such Baltimore State University professor has proposed. You might respond with, no, we shouldn't, that's racist. You stated your objection and your reason behind it. Now, if this person chooses to use the aforementioned definition of racist, requiring power dynamics between races to be present, then they have two options for response. One, they could acknowledge that you are using the word to mean something different than they do, and then defend their position as to why they deem it acceptable to propose an idea that is discriminatory based on race. Because if they are able to acknowledge that you use the word differently than they are able to understand what you initially accused them of. If they simply try to engage you in an argument about what the definition of the word racism is, then they've entirely sidestepped the accusation against them. Instead of addressing the claim that they've proposed ethnic discrimination and why it is justifiable, they've derailed the conversation into a discussion of the semantics of a word, an exercise in futility that is sure to devolve and distract, as the answer is going to be subjective based on each person's background. And like I said before, some people don't understand the fallacy. They don't understand that just because you change the definition of a word doesn't mean the idea that the word formerly represented goes away. You have simply co-opted the means to express it in a precise manner. This is why it's such a nasty technique. It is completely dismissive of a charge that needs to be defended because of how nasty the charge really is. Being accused of racism is a very serious claim. Regardless of how often it is thrown around today, it's a very dirty thing, and it should be treated as such. When you try to sidestep the charge of unjustifiably discriminating based on ethnicity, then you look like a bad person. You look like you are purposefully avoiding defending your position because it is inherently indefensible. If this is not the case, then you need to defend your statement, not provide a red herring in order to escape refutation. The best thing to do if you find yourself in a situation where somebody is throwing this out as a deferment technique is to simply concede the point. Concede that different people will identify different definitions for words based on their culture. Then repeat your accusation using the definition of the word in place of the word itself. This will be a way to force them to legitimately justify their beliefs and their rationale. I hope this video has helped or may help somebody in the future. If anybody sees this video and wants me to take a look at any specific arguments they may be having trouble with, I would love to try and provide some insight for them for better or for worse. Thanks, guys.